A Kennedy marrying a Terminator. It sounds like the setup for a surreal political rom-com, but for decades it was real life. A union that captivated the world. She was American royalty. He was Hollywood muscle turned political powerhouse. Together, they seemed unstoppable. But beneath the polished surface of public appearances and press coverage was a quiet, unraveling storm. A betrayal hidden in the open. A secret child. And a family forced to confront a truth that had been living under their own roof for years. This is the untold, intimate journey of Maria Shriver and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Two icons bound by love, ambition, scandal, and ultimately a choice. To fight for their family, even after the marriage was over. Let's start at the beginning. In 1977, Maria Shriver wasn't just any young journalist. She was a Kennedy, daughter of Eunice Kennedy Shriver and niece to President John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy. Her upbringing was steeped in politics, public service, and the ever-present shadow of American legacy. She carried herself with poise and purpose, following a path paved by her iconic family, yet always striving to carve her own name in the world of journalism. Enter Arnold Schwarzenegger, an immigrant from Thal, Austria, who barely spoke English when he first arrived in America. Arnold was already making waves in the bodybuilding world. By the late 1970s, he had won multiple Mr. Olympia titles and had set his sights on Hollywood. He wasn't just aiming to be the next action star, he was aiming to redefine masculinity on the big screen. And off-screen? He was magnetic, bold, full of charm, and completely different from anything or anyone the Kennedys had ever known. Their paths crossed at a charity tennis tournament hosted by Tom Brokaw. Arnold saw Maria and was immediately drawn in. The bold bodybuilder with a thick Austrian accent and the refined Kennedy journalist might have seemed mismatched, but sparks flew. Their chemistry was undeniable. What followed was nearly a decade of dating, travel, career building, and navigating the pressures of their high-profile lives. In 1986, they married at St. Francis Xavier Church in Hyannis, Massachusetts, part of the Kennedy compound. The guest list was a who's who of political elites and Hollywood royalty. The press called it a modern American fairy tale. The world watched in awe. But every fairy tale has its trials. From the moment Maria and Arnold said "I do," the world didn't just witness the union of two people. It watched the merging of two American empires, the legacy of the Kennedys and the unstoppable rise of Schwarzenegger. What followed was nearly 2 decades of intense ambition, career highs, and carefully balanced family life, all lived under the constant scrutiny of the public eye. Arnold wasted no time capitalizing on his momentum. Between Predator, Twins, Total Recall, and Terminator 2, his star status exploded. He wasn't just playing action heroes, he was the action genre. By the early 90s, he had become a global icon. His image was as much about biceps and explosions as it was about discipline, confidence, and the immigrant dream fulfilled. Maria, meanwhile, kept her own career in full motion. She wasn't simply the wife of a movie star. She was an award-winning journalist with CBS and NBC. Her interviews carried weight. She was articulate, sharp, and unafraid to tackle serious stories. Even with 4 young children, she managed to write best-selling books, contribute to major networks, and become a powerful advocate for causes close to her heart, particularly Alzheimer's research, inspired by her father's diagnosis. At home, they worked to create something that resembled normalcy, at least as much as was possible in a mansion where both parents were headline names. Their children were raised in an environment that emphasized hard work, faith, and discipline. Maria often spoke about trying to instill old-school values in a high-stakes, high-profile world. But even then, there were signs of strain. Arnold's charm, the same quality that won over audiences worldwide, didn't always translate well in private. His reputation for flirting even in front of Maria made headlines on more than one occasion. And Maria, her grace, was carrying the quiet burden of constantly defending her husband's image while anchoring the family at home. And then came the biggest shift of all: politics. In 2003, Arnold announced his candidacy for governor of California during a surprise appearance on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Maria was stunned. In fact, some reports say she wasn't even consulted before he made the announcement. Still, she quickly stood by his side. stepping away from journalism to avoid any conflict of interest and lending him the credibility her last name carried. It worked. Arnold won the recall election and was sworn in as the 38th governor of California. Suddenly, their family was no longer just Hollywood royalty. They were living in the state's governor's mansion. The Schwarzenegger-Shriver household had become a true dynasty, juggling red carpets and campaign rallies, parent-teacher meetings and press briefings. But behind the polished speeches and photo ops, something more fragile was unfolding, something that even the most powerful names couldn't control. It wasn't a headline, it was a detonation. On May 16, 2011, the Los Angeles Times published a report that left even seasoned Hollywood observers speechless. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the former governor, global movie icon, and husband of Maria Shriver for 25 years, had fathered a child with the family's longtime housekeeper, Mildred Baena. But this wasn't a recent mistake. Joseph Baena had been born in 1997, 14 years before the news broke. And during all those years, the child had lived just miles from the Schwarzenegger mansion, often inside it, visiting with his mother while Maria cooked family dinners and raised her children. The betrayal wasn't just infidelity, it was proximity. The truth had grown up within arm's reach of Maria and her kids. The most unsettling detail? Joseph's resemblance to Arnold had become more apparent with age. By his early teens, his facial features, frame, even his posture mirrored Arnold's unmistakably. Maria, sharp and intuitive, had quietly suspected something. It was during a counseling session that she asked Arnold directly, and for the first time, he told her the truth. The moment was seismic. Maria didn't hold a press conference. She didn't lash out. But she did move out of their home immediately, taking a step that signaled how deeply the trust had been broken. She later said, in private conversations, that it felt like her entire life had been a performance she didn't know she was in. The marriage, which she had poured her energy, loyalty, and years into preserving, suddenly felt hollow. As for Arnold, his public acknowledgement was blunt and unembellished. After leaving the governor's office, he stated, "I told my wife about this event, which occurred over a decade ago." Just like that. A sentence to summarize a secret that had shaken a family to its core. But behind the calm tone was a man who knew he detonated his own legacy. This revelation was more than personal. It was political, emotional, and existential. Because while the public consumed it as tabloid drama, for the Schwarzenegger-Shriver family, it was a rupture that required a completely new definition of family. One forged in truth, pain, and eventually, a quiet kind of acceptance. Maria filed for divorce quickly, but the legal proceedings dragged on for a decade, 10 full years. Some say it was due to the complexity of their shared assets. Others believe it was about emotions, trying to process a trauma that hit both privately and publicly. Maria and Arnold had built a shared empire, multiple properties, investments, and businesses. But perhaps the hardest part wasn't the money. It was how to move forward as a family without completely falling apart. Their children were thrust into the spotlight. Overnight, the Schwarzenegger family became tabloid targets. But remarkably, Catherine, Christina, Patrick, and Christopher handled the situation with extraordinary grace, largely thanks to their parents' choice to keep things civil, even during the worst of it. In the background, Arnold began to form a bond with Joseph. Despite the circumstances of his birth, Joseph was his son. They started working out together, spending time together. Slowly, they began to build a relationship that would redefine fatherhood for both of them. By 2021, the divorce was finalized quietly. No public hearings, no sensational headlines, just a closed chapter in one of the most public love stories of the last 40 years. What followed wasn't a reunion, but it was something just as rare: mutual respect after heartbreak. Maria focused on healing. She became an advocate for personal growth, spirituality, and forgiveness. She launched the Sunday Paper, a soulful newsletter focused on reinvention and intention. In interviews, she spoke candidly, but never bitterly, about her journey. Her goal wasn't revenge, it was understanding, closure, peace. Arnold, for his part, didn't run from the scandal. He acknowledged his mistakes. In a candid interview, he called the affair his biggest failure. He took responsibility, not just in words, but in actions, by showing up for all 5 of his children, including Joseph, and never once trying to rewrite the truth. They've been seen attending the same events, celebrating holidays with their children, even traveling together. Not as a couple, but as two parents who still cared deeply about the family they built. And that family? Thriving. Catherine married actor Chris Pratt and started her own family. Patrick pursued acting and business ventures. Christina dove into writing and philanthropy. Christopher stayed out of the spotlight to focus on academics. And Joseph, once at the center of the storm, has grown into a confident, motivated young man, one who honors both his parents and their complex legacy. The story of Maria Shriver and Arnold Schwarzenegger isn't just about scandal, it's about resilience. It's about two very public people navigating very private pain and choosing not to let it destroy what mattered most, their family. It's about redefining what love, commitment, and forgiveness look like when the script doesn't follow the fairy tale. And above all, it's a reminder that behind every headline, there are people, flawed, brave, and doing their best to heal in the only ways they know how. If you made it this far, thanks for staying with us through this real, raw journey. Hit that like button if this story gave you a new perspective, and let us know in the comments. Can you respect someone after a betrayal? What would you have done in Maria's shoes? Subscribe for more stories that dig deeper than the headlines. And don't forget to check the description for updates on where Maria and Arnold are today and how you can use their journey as inspiration for your own growth, no matter where you're at in life. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.